What is up, you guys? I am Missy Renee, and on this channel we talk about manifesting. All things manifesting. How to do it, how to properly apply it, so that you can live that kick-ass dream life that you have always wanted. And in today's video, we're going to talk about success stories, because who does not love a good success story? I have to tell you guys, since I found Neville, I have manifested thousands of things. I have so many different manifestations that I had a pretty hard time trying to draw up a few in a short video. So this video has actually been requested a couple of times now, and I figured I would bring you guys some of the best success stories that I've had and that I've found to hopefully get you guys a little bit more captivated and maybe a bit more on the bandwagon to try his techniques and to try his teachings, because these are absolutely going to change your life. So jumping right into it, I found Neville Goddard about 8 years ago, the first time I stumbled onto him. This was shortly after I started getting into the law of attraction. I was trying to find everything that I could on the topic. I was out there studying and searching and researching and testing and applying everything that I could find. But I didn't get too far with Neville the first time around. I was not really captivated at first, but that changed a number of years later. About 4 years ago now, I came back to Neville after I had a really powerful mystical experience that I haven't really talked about much. Neville talks about it in his book, The Law and the Promise, and I have actually experienced what Neville describes as the promise. If you guys are interested in learning about that and having me tell you about that experience, definitely drop a comment below and I will make a video about the promise and my experience with it. Long story short, I started to really dive in after that mystical experience that I had. This was back in 2016. This was late 2016. I started reading his materials. I started to gather everything that I could and everything that I could find. I was devouring his books and his lectures, and I finally said, okay, Missy, you need to put it to the test. You need to do exactly as he's described. There is no more searching. There is no more looking. You have to just try it. And so I started with some smaller things. I wanted to kind of get my toes wet, so to speak, and I wanted to make sure that I build my faith up a little bit first, because I'll admit that I was highly skeptical going into it the first time. So I wanted to try some things that I knew I probably wouldn't be met with a lot of resistance at first. So I did some scripting. And I'll never forget the first time I really put Neville to the test was actually by scripting out some of the things that I wanted to see happen. And a couple of those items on that list were things like, I received a free cup of coffee. I saw a butterfly today, because we don't have too many butterflies where I am out in the city. And I also wrote down on that list, I received a message from a friend that I haven't spoken to in a very long time. Well, sure enough, a couple of days after I had made this list, after I had scripted these items out, I received that free cup of coffee, not once, but 3 times that week. I had a butterfly actually land on my hand and on my shoe, which was absolutely insane. That was something I've never experienced before. I was just trying to see if I could see one in the wild. And then I had 2 people back to back. One person who I have not spoken to since we were in grade school, and the other person we haven't spoken since we were in high school. In that same week, they both reached out to me. So I was pretty floored at this point. I was pretty taken aback, because it's really hard to chalk it up to coincidence when everything kind of lines up all in the same week, exactly how you had scripted it out. But I wasn't entirely convinced just yet. I still had that little bit of room and that little bit of like, well, that could have just been a coincidence. So let's do something bigger to really hone in and see if this actually works. So I decided to do the ladder technique. what Neville described as the ladder technique. And for those of you who are not familiar with the ladder technique or the ladder experiment, I made a video all about it. I will link that video up here. I will also link it down in the description box below. The ladder technique was Neville's test, so to speak, that he would give to his followers and give them something to try so that they can test the law and the powers of the law. I did this myself. I talk about it in that video, but essentially going into the ladder experiment, I was very skeptical because I have never had to climb a ladder in my life, maybe once or twice at most. So I was like, yeah, this is probably not going to happen, but I'm going to test it. I'm just going to see what happens. And I was at first almost trying to prove this wrong. At this point, I was almost getting a little bit jaded with the law of attraction, so I was almost determined to prove these teachings wrong. So I said, screw it. I don't know how this is going to pan out, but I'm just going to do it. So basically, with the ladder technique, Neville describes that for 3 nights, you imagine in the state akin to sleep, right before bed, that you are climbing a ladder. And then you climb back down again and you climb up again. You repeat that scene in your imagination until you fall off to bed. And you do this for 3 nights. And during the day, you write on a piece of paper, I will not climb a ladder. And you put that piece of paper somewhere that you're going to see it often. And I put on a sticky note, I will not climb a ladder. And I put that note everywhere that I could. I put it on my dashboard in my car, I put it on my dresser, I put it on my desk in my office. I made sure that every time I saw that piece of paper to affirm with conviction that I would not climb a ladder. I did this for 3 nights and then I dropped it, just like Neville described. And about a week or so later, I got a call from a client, from an old client of mine who wanted me to come do some pickup shots for her music video. I went over to her house and I got everything set up. She wanted to get a shot at a certain angle, and in order to get this shot, I had to climb a ladder. And I remember being halfway up that ladder and I was just like, oh my God, this is actually happening right now. It was mind-blowing. And right then I was kind of like, okay, I think I'm onto something here. I think this whole law of assumption thing might actually be something to look into. Because again, I have never had to climb a ladder. And the fact that I was now climbing one, not even a week after finishing this exercise, I had a very hard time chalking that up to coincidence. So after the ladder technique, I started getting that fire in my belly and I was determined to do something big. I was like, okay, Missy, you've manifested a few things that were quite impressive, but now it's time to do something big. We need to do something that is going to prove once and for all that this is in fact truth or it's all bogus. So I decided that I wanted to take a trip to Hawaii. And at the time, I was pretty broke. Work was hit or miss, and I did not have the money to just buy a plane ticket and go to Hawaii. So I had no idea how I was going to pull this off. I didn't know what was going to happen, but nonetheless, I went to bed every night and I imagined myself on the beach of Maui. I imagined walking along the beach, and I tried to make that scene as descriptive and vivid as possible, to the point where I could feel the sand between my toes. I can hear the sounds of the waves crashing against the rocks. I can hear all of the birds and the toads and all of the wildlife humming and vibrating. I could smell the salt water in the air. I got so descriptive with it, and it got scary how accurate this was. I got that scene so descriptive that I could not tell that I was imagining it. It felt so solidly real. And I fell asleep every night to this scene. And then 2 weeks went by, and I had a friend call me up out of the blue, and she was going through a rough breakup, unfortunately. But she wanted to travel. She wanted to do something to get her mind off of the breakup. She wanted to kind of kick up her routine. Basically wanted to do the whole eat, pray, love thing, but she didn't want to go alone. So she called me up and said, Missy, I'm going to Hawaii in a couple of weeks and I don't want to go alone. Do you want to join me? And I just about dropped the phone. I could not believe that this was actually happening. And I told her, look, I would love to go, but I'm kind of broke right now. This spring has been pretty slow for my work, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to afford to do that. And she said, don't worry about it. I've got your ticket covered. I've got your suite covered. All expenses are paid. I just don't want to go by myself. I really want somebody to come with me. So 1 month after I had first started imagining being in that beach in Hawaii, I was on that beach in Hawaii. It still gives me chills to think about it to this day. So after Maui, I had a fire under me. I wanted to just put this to the test over and over and over again. One thing that I've always wanted to do since I was very little was travel. I've never had the chance to travel much. It's never been something I've been able to do growing up. So I used my imagination to get me to places like Berlin. I went to London. And the biggest feat that I say I had was getting myself in the Cannes Film Festival. I got accepted to the Cannes Film Festival, which for those of you who don't know, it's actually a private festival. You can't just get in there. I had manifested myself to be able to go, and that was absolutely insane how that all played out. And that has to be a video for another time because that is a long story in itself. I manifested travel all over Europe, all over Canada. I went to Mexico. It was absolutely insane. It was absolutely wild. It was something that I never thought I would be able to do. And in the span of 6 months, I had traveled to new continents. I had seen new parts of the world that I had never seen before. And I got accepted to go to the biggest and most prestigious film festival in the world. So by this point, I was an avid believer. I could no longer chalk it up to coincidence. I could no longer doubt that any of this was real. Neville Goddard was in fact the real deal. Around this time, I had also started to really play around with Everyone Is You Pushed Out, and I kid you not, I have successfully made it so that people completely changed. I have made it so people morphed into the character that I wanted them to be. I remember I had a nightmare client one time who was an absolute pain to work with. She was so difficult, and I used my imagination and I imagined her being super gracious and very friendly and very easygoing. And I kid you not, after working with this woman on and off for like 5 years, and she was always just a freaking pain to deal with, after I started imagining her being a different person, after I imagined her being a much more gracious and kind version, she changed. Like within a couple of days, I noticed behavior was night and day. My mind was absolutely blown. It was absolutely blown. I also started playing around with revision around this time, and I wanted to make sure to revise certain aspects of my childhood to where things turned out differently. I wanted to play around to where certain aspects of my past were different, and that way it would affect my future. So one of the things I revised was growing up poor. I had grown up in poverty. I had very little money. My parents were always struggling growing up. So when I started testing revision, one of the first things I did was I imagined that we grew up wealthy, that my family grew up well off, and we never had any financial hurdles. We never had any financial issues. And that we were very stable and sound and functional and healthy. Well, I kid you not, guys. I kid you not. A couple weeks after I had started revising this scene, and after I had started revising this childhood memory, I had my mom call me up in tears. And it turned out that she got a call earlier that day from a long-lost uncle, an estranged uncle that had removed himself from my family about 25 years ago. No joke, there was zero communication between him and anybody else in my family. Well, he came to apologize. And he came to my mom to say that he was sorry and he was begging for forgiveness. He ended up reaching out to my grandparents and my aunt and all the members of my family and extended his deepest, regrets and deepest apologies. He wanted to make things up to us. He wanted to be back in our lives again. And of course, my family accepted him with open arms. I mean, this was my uncle. I still very much loved him, no matter what. Well, it turns out he was also very, very successful. As a way of trying to make up for all the things that had happened and all the time that had passed, he offered to help us out and made sure that there was never any stress or financial hurdles that we'd have to go through. He cleared out all of my mom's debt, all of my aunt's debt. He wiped everybody's slate clean and basically made it so that if there was anything that we needed at all, he had us covered. To this day, we're still very much so much better off financially. There is no more of that struggle. There's no more of that strife. There's no more of that stress. And once again, I was just completely mind blown at how this worked. And I could not in a million years have fathomed that scenario. I could not even tell you that that was going to happen. I mean, again, this was a guy who had removed himself 25 years prior. It still blows my mind thinking about it. It still blows my mind. One of the other big manifestations that I had was last year. My business partner had come down with a severe illness. It was a very scary time. He came down with a severe case of diverticulitis, and he was told by his doctors that he was going to have surgery. They were going to have to remove a huge part of his intestines. Needless to say, it was awful. It was absolutely awful. And I'll never forget this one either, because he was in the hospital for 2 weeks. And the doctors had told me at that time that there was nothing that they can really do, that intestines don't just heal themselves. And what had happened was the diverticulitis had gotten so severe that it had perforated his intestines. It was serious, and they were going to have to do surgery. And the doctor said, "I'm sorry, there's really nothing that we can do because your intestines don't just heal themselves. It's something that we're going to have to manually take care of." My business partner and I were just distraught. This was completely out of the blue. I did not take that response as final. What the doctors told me in that diagnosis, I refused to accept it. So I went into my imagination and I heard the doctors telling me that he was making a full recovery and that they were just getting ready to discharge him, that they couldn't believe what they had seen, but he was not going to have surgery after all, and he was going to be good to go. Mind you, this was defeating some serious odds if this were to happen. The doctors said that in his 30 years of practicing and being a GI specialist, he's never seen somebody miraculously heal when they've perforated their intestines. Well, about a week later, the doctors came in one morning, and I had stayed the night there to keep him company. He was really scared, of course. The doctor came in after they did some tests and some x-rays, and he looked absolutely flabbergasted. Let's just call my business partner Blake Johnson. He said, "Mr. Johnson, it looks like you've actually made quite a recovery, and we don't really know and understand how this happened, but from the looks of it, you're not going to have surgery after all, because you're actually healing quite nicely." And I cried. That one got me, because this was, again, like the doctor told me that he's never seen anything like that in the 30 years that he's been doing medicine. But he ended up saying exactly what I heard him say in my imagination. And a couple days later, my business partner was in fact discharged, and he has not had any issues ever since. So again, those are just a few of the thousands of success stories that I've had using Neville Goddard's techniques, and I could seriously go on and on forever. I have manifested money Every time that I've needed it, anytime that I didn't have it, I would manifest it from all different places. I manifested a $50,000 client from a huge brand name. I've manifested money from the lottery. I've manifested specific people. I have manifested people changing. I've imagined circumstances changing. It has gotten to the point now where I don't even look at it as techniques. I don't use techniques. I'm so convinced, and it is so ingrained in me, that as long as I know that what I desire is already mine, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it. It's really that simple. I barely even have to use any techniques anymore. I mean, I'll still use my imagination for fun because it feels good, but I will just be going along my day, and if something happens that I don't like, I don't accept it. I don't accept it as final. And then sure enough, it changes. So it really has become a way of life now. This is something that is so deeply ingrained in me, and my beliefs, is that I can truly get anything that I want. I can have anything that I want. I could change any circumstances that I don't like. I could change any behaviors that I don't like. I can manifest any money or material items that I need. I've also manifested getting rid of my anxiety. I've manifested self-confidence. I have been able to manifest changes in my character, aspects that I didn't think it was possible to change. As I promise you, a couple of years ago, I wouldn't even be able to do this, just sitting in front of a camera, talking to it like I'm doing now. I was incredibly anxious. I suffered from a lot of depression, and it was to the point where it was debilitating. I didn't think I was ever going to be able to get over it, but sure enough, with using my imagination, I have been able to overcome any hurdles that have come up in the way. So I can say with 1,000,000% certainty that this is the real deal, guys. And I wanted to make this video as a sort of boost and encouragement. I know that everybody loves good success stories. Everybody loves a good success story, or 2, or 5, or 10. So I wanted to make this to give you guys something to kind of boost your morale and really put this to the test. You have absolutely nothing to lose. You have everything to gain, and it is 1000% spot on. The way to manifest anything that you want is to know for a fact that what you desire is already yours. You already have it. It is in the bag. It is not an issue. It doesn't matter how big, how small, how far, how close. None of that matters. None of it matters. Your imagination is God. Your consciousness is God. You have an incredible tool at your disposal. And it's what has really pushed me to make this channel and to get this word out there, because I'm telling you, you guys, my life changed completely since finding these teachings. So I encourage every single one of you, try this, try it, try it. Let me know in the comments how it goes. If you are new to the teachings of Neville, if you are new to manifesting, I have made a playlist that goes over all of the fundamentals, everything that you need to know in order to successfully manifest anything that you want. And I mean anything. You can check out that playlist up here and also down in the description box below. You can also check these videos out over here, or maybe they're over here, I'm not sure. But check out these videos. They go more into different topics and different subjects. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day wherever you are, and never forget how powerful you truly are. Happy manifesting.